we go. All right. We're here with Jack Carr. Jack, how you doing?
Doing great. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Was trying to get you on earlier this spring when Red Sky Morning came out, but our schedules. I talked to David Brown and I was like, I got to get him on. He's like, yes, absolutely, let's do it. And then
Awesome.
you were out of the country. My son was graduating high school, and we had a million things going on. And I was like, yeah, we'll catch him on the nonfiction end, which is great because I'm super pumped about Targeted. Great book
Nice.
so far.
Thank you.
Thanks for sending me one.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great. Yeah, probably also we had the book had to get moved from May to June because everything was
Hmm.
so crazy. So we had that thrown in there as well. But yeah, every time I try to book something now, it's like I double book. Cause a problem. Like it's the schedule is like I just did it today. I did something else today. I was like, oh yeah, sure. And I totally had the times wrong, and I didn't check with David Brown and everyone who was actually in charge of the scheduling, and I totally messed things up. So
You're a
now I
busy
just got to
guy.
be like, I got to just like not muck about with that sort of thing because I am obviously just gonna screw things up.
Well, I'm sure the time that you do have at home, you've got other things going on, other business to attend to. So when you can finally sit down in front of a computer, I'm sure it's more than just checking emails.
The emails are tough these days. Oh my goodness, they're coming in fast and furious. But working on the next book already, so it's really about trying to get at this stage more efficient with time and schedule and having processes in place that allow me to do those things that only I do, which is the writing, and maybe have somebody else do other things like create a rough draft of the newsletter, and then I'll edit it or something. Because in the beginning, when it's just you, it's like a startup.
I know.
It's 100% a startup, and you are the CEO, you are the CFO, you are the CMO, you are the social media coordinator, you are customer service, you make the product, and you're doing it all with no help out of your garage, essentially. And any assets that, let's say, and it doesn't have to be publishing, but my experience is publishing. So let's say Simon and Schuster in the beginning, they're certainly not going to invest assets in someone who's hasn't proven that they're a good return on the investment. So in publishing, it's kind of like Hollywood in that the Avengers movies, those types of movies, pay for everybody else.
Yeah.
They pay for all the other ones that win the Academy Awards and do all that stuff. So there's names that have been on that New York Times list for decades that pay for everybody else typically, and that's Stephen King, and that's John Grisham, and James Patterson, and those the Clancy estate, and even though those books continued past Clancy's death. So it's those names that we all know from all
Yeah.
those years. So for me, I recognized that very early on, and just took kind of ownership of it and decided to do all those things that authors couldn't have done back in those days to build a readership, capitalize on some of these platforms that are out there that those authors don't need to do now because they built up a readership during a time when you didn't need to do anything else. And so I decided to just do that and then prove to Simon and Schuster that I was a good investment. And then right out of the gate, the first book was profitable for them, and so they like that, of course. So now maybe you get a little bit more. But in the beginning, it's definite startup. No one knows you. You're not
Right.
coming from politics, sports. You're not coming from another company where you had some sort of recognition or anything like that. You were starting from zero, and you're in your garage, and it's go. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like that. So it was a very long way of me saying that, yeah, now it's time to take it from startup mentality, I think, and move into like, and I think I'm a good entrepreneur, but I'm not a good businessman, if that makes sense. I differentiate those two things in my mind, and I think a lot of people do because, well, if the example is that all sorts of different companies out there get started by someone who has the passion for whatever X widget might be, and they
Yep.
build it and they get to a certain stage, and then that company gets bought. And that person essentially gets replaced. Maybe they go sit on the board or whatever else. But now you bring in people who can put these processes in place to grow it. And so I feel like that's kind of like the stage that I'm in right now. Is I need to bring people in to take care of those other verticals so that I can focus on the writing and not be distracted by all those other things constantly, so I can get in a better rhythm for the writing and a little more healthy
Yeah.
rhythm as well.
Well, I think that's smart business. I majored in business, and that was one of the biggest things that I think I took away from it is, your passion and your creativity, and all that. When it mixes with business, sometimes that can be kind of a controversy. It can clash because, you know, what is always a great idea isn't a great business move. So yeah, you got to bring the people in, the experts in that can help you execute those things. Because yeah, I mean, and you've gotten so big and had so much success that I can't believe you don't have it already. You're still running the show.
I was a little late. Yeah, I was a little late to it. I started, I hired my first person last September,
Wow.
and it as a chief of staff, and so it was it almost six years without anyone? So 6 years without anybody, and but then yeah, so she's been learning everything, and then we started hiring like ecom, someone to manage the ecom side of the house,
Yeah.
someone to manage the merch in the warehouse, someone producer, a video person. Bring it. Yeah. So like all those kind of gaps, it just takes a little while to identify the gaps and then hire to fill a gap and then see how that person, like what other skills they have that overlap maybe, because everything overlaps it seems like,
Yeah.
and then it's okay, where's the other gap? Okay, that needs to be filled with this person or this contractor or whatever it is. So it's it'll be good getting there.
Yeah.
It's all it's fantastic. It's a great place to be, but really it's just about trying to figure out how to get time back that I can spend on writing so that I'm not up from 10 at night to like 6 in the morning and then
I know.
stumble in and try to help get the kids to school type of a thing. So
That's
working
what
on
I
it.
got to do. I got to squeeze it in. I wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I work on writing and blog posts
Oh wow.
and podcast stuff, and then I go to work at 7. 7:30 to 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then I'm just trying to
Wow.
record or rest, and I'm doing it all again. So it's just keeping up
Oh
with it as a
man,
grind.
that is wild.
Yeah,
And
and
at
I'm
what
not
time do you
published yet.
what time do you shut it down at night? Do you have are you in the stage where you're like, hey, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to work until I can't work anymore, and then I'm going to get some sleep, and then even though I don't want to get up, I'm going to get up? Like what stage are you in?
So I try to. Well, I'm fortunate because my wife works in dermatology, so sometimes she ain't getting home till 6:30 or 7 o'clock. So I might do this until she gets home, or write until she gets home, and then I'll take a break, and then I might get a little writing in the evening. But 9:30, 10 o'clock, I'm gassed. I gotta shut it down. Or I'll just sit there staring at a keyboard,
Oh,
and
that's rough.
nothing.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, for me, that's the only time I'm not being interrupted is finally when most everybody else is asleep in the house, and not even in the house, but just like even if the phone's in the other room and this computer's in the other room, and I have another computer that I use just for writing, so I can just not have any other distractions on there. It's connected to the internet so that Word can update and do that stuff. And I send myself emails to it that only I have that email address, and it's just for me, like ideas and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So
Yeah.
it's strictly for writing. But even though those phone and the computer are in another room or even on another floor of the house, just it being, let's say, 1 p.m. in the afternoon, in my mind, I still like feel that people are trying to get a hold of me on those devices. But I know that at like 2 in the morning, no one is. And for some reason, that was freeing for
Mm.
the last 7 books anyway. That was like freeing to be able to like not be distracted by even the minute bit of bandwidth that's taken up by wondering if anybody is calling me about something right now. So anyway, I need to work on that. So work in progress.
Yeah. So normally this time of year, September timeframe, you are releasing new news about the next James Reece novel, and of course,
Oh.
instead, you got this coming out this year, targeted Beirut. Um, what inspired you to go into nonfiction and do something you've never done, which is, one nonfiction, but two, release 2 books a year?
Yeah, well, I'll say the first thing is there was the option of releasing some news about the next thriller earlier on. I thought, no, let's keep let's not confuse anything.
Yeah.
Go all in on targeted through this week through book tour, and then at the end of that. There'll be some news about what's coming next, so that'll be short on the heels of Beirut here in the next couple of weeks. There'll be some news about what's coming in the spring. But for me, I'm a student of history, just like I was a student of warfare. I weave a lot of history into my novels anyway, even if it's just like a sentence or two to give some character a background, and not just writing about what their background is or something, but maybe in conversation they weave something into a conversation that gives the reader or now the listener a little insight into their character because they brought up something else. They brought up a historical fact, or they're using some sort of past experience or a lesson learned from a past event to influence a current decision in that conversation. But either way, it lends something to that character. And so I do that anyway. I do that in the pages of the novels and my social media. I talk about different terrorist events, in particular, specifically ones that had an impact on me or that were, impactful, kind of historically. So I try to do that. I try to do it fact only, not like how horrible this group is or that group was or how all this people need to, I just try to give just the facts. Then people get upset about that regardless. But I try to
Yeah,
keep it to
can't
just
please
the
everybody.
facts about it's oh my goodness, no, you can't. You just got to just do the best you can and keep moving forward. That's the best thing, and not get drug into anything online. But I try to do that, and I always knew I'd move into the nonfiction space at some point. It was only a question of when. And when I thought I'd built up enough political capital with Simon and Schuster, where I could pitch a new idea, I did so. So it's about 2.5, maybe even 3 years now that I pitched them on Targeted. They love the idea, and what I did when I talked to them about it is I wrote down probably about 3 pages worth of different terrorist events from the end of World War II up to the time I gave that pitch a couple years ago. And unfortunately, there's enough to fill all those pages. And I kept coming back to Beirut 1983 for a couple reasons. One, because it was such a turning point in our relationship with the Middle East. And two, because there wasn't a book that if someone asked you, hey, what should I read on Beirut 1983 or on the Marine barracks and headquarters bombing in October of 1983, what book should I read? There wasn't really the one you could point to. There was a couple books written by guys that were there, but they were very old. And no one had really explored it in all these years since. There's recently declassified documents from the Reagan administration as well. But for me, it was really, I just kept coming back to that. And I remember as a kid, the Newsweek cover and the Time magazine cover, those are the two magazines that we had at our house. I remember them on the dining room table. I knew that I was going to go in the military, even at that young age. And somehow, even that early on, I knew that my generation's fight would be something, terrorism would be involved in this generation's fight. But I knew that even as a little kid. I think probably because of the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis. Now I remember those photos. I remember Walter Cronkite. I was in a Catholic school at the time. I remember them taking us out of class to go to church and all that. But I kept coming back. But there's been a lot written on 1979 Iranian hostage crisis, on Desert One, all that. But Beirut 1983, I remember it when I was a kid, and I've studied it a little bit since. There isn't that seminal work on it, and it was such a turning point. So that's the one I wanted to focus on. But I also told them, hey, I want to work with someone on this because it's going to be, a ton of work. And two, I need someone who knows what they're doing in the nonfiction space. I don't want this to be like popular history type thing where I want it to be approachable, but I don't want it to be so approachable that it's just other people's books that I'm just grabbing things from and rewording and maybe adding a little analysis and putting it into my own.
Like a
And
lot of
there's little
nonfiction is,
yes,
which is fine. Which
exactly,
is fine.
which is
But
fun. It's wonderful, but
yeah,
that's not what I wanted. And so I wanted something that would stand the test of time. And typically, there's about a 20-year turnover between a serious examination of different historical events. There might be books here and there about one in between there, but really, it seems like, generally speaking, that every 20 years there's a re-examination of something, and there's like a new book that comes out about X or Y or whatever it might be. So for me, I wanted this to be an actual work of history. I wanted to go to primary sources. I wanted to dive into the Reagan archives. I wanted to read these recently declassified documents. I wanted to read letters that people had written home from Beirut, listen to audio tapes, and I wanted to do it with somebody who knew what they were doing. So when they asked me, who do you want to work with? I said, James Scott, and I have his other book. He has 5 books. There's 4 on World War II. But his work was amazing, and I feel weird when I get asked about it now because I didn't go and to YouTube and look at one interview with him. I had no sense of him as a person. It was all about the work, and I didn't know if he would say yes or if I could get in touch with him or if he was too serious, to want to to entertain the thought of doing something with somebody else or anything like that. So my publisher asked me on this call, and my agent was on there too. And they're, who do you want to work with? And I said, well, this guy James Scott. And they said, well, who's his agent? We can ask him. And I was looking in the acknowledgments of his latest book, and I was looking, or maybe the author's note. And I said, well, he's thanking somebody in here named John Glessman. I think it's his editor. And my publisher was like, what? that's my husband. And so Emily Bessler is my publisher and editor, and her husband is in publishing, and he is the editor for James Scott for his other books.
No
And
way.
yeah, so they linked up the call, and we jumped on together and totally hit it out of the, we just hit it off. And he was so excited to work on something, and he was kind of looking for something new after doing World War II for all these books in a row. He was kind of thinking about what to do next, and so the timing was great. And he's just an amazing guy and a kind human being. So it worked out just fantastic, and I could not be more pleased with this. But from the very beginning, also what we wanted was to get out of the way of this story. We wanted to make sure that this is not my story, this is not James's story. This is the story of those people who were there,
Yeah.
the family who lost loved ones. So for us, from the very beginning, what we want to do is get out of the way of these stories because they're not ours, and really the trust from these families who lost loved ones, from people who were there that are telling us these stories. I mean, it's humbling. It's
Yeah.
humbling that they trusted us to do this. And also, my idea was like one a year because I think in my mind I had in some of the comps that I talked to Simon and Schuster about, there were more of that popular history kind where you're reading other people's books and kind of just regurgitating it, giving your analysis, and that sort of a thing. And it's about, I think it was probably 2 weeks in to starting this one, the research. I called Simon and Schuster back, and I was like, "Hey, I know what the contract says, and I know what I said, but to do this right, it's going to be at least 2 years between each one of these nonfiction books because you want to do these stories justice. There's people that are still alive dealing with the emotional and physical trauma of that day.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
families that have an empty chair at the dinner table and have had that empty chair there since October 23rd, 1983. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that,
Yeah.
and I didn't rush anything out just to get something out to sell it or whatever. I wanted to make sure that we were doing these stories justice and doing it the right way and putting in the work. So hence every 2 years, and if it takes longer than 2 years for the next one, then hey, so be it.
Yeah. I certainly can appreciate that because it reads so well. It reads like a thriller. Like, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And I was like, okay, what's Jack got up his sleeve for this? And then it reads like a story. It doesn't read like, and I say this complimentary, by the way. It reads like you're retelling the events and the emotions and the things behind it and the facts and this origin story on the war on terror and how it was such a defining moment. Not that other moments aren't, but it really highlights that. I think you did a fantastic job. It's a great, great book, and I've recommended it to people already. And
Oh, awesome! Thank
yeah,
you,
yeah,
thank
it's,
you.
it's great. I think you nailed it, man. It's really cool, and I'm glad to hear. My next question was going to be: Are there going to be other targeted books? Do you have other events in mind now that you've kind of worked
Yeah,
through the process? I know it's early,
I do.
but
I do. We're already at work on the next one. And the other thing, Joe, back to answer your question even a little more fully, I also was very aware from the fan perspective as a kid reading when I'm reading my Tom Clancy's and Nelson DeMille's and AJ Quinnell, J.C. Pollock, Mark Olden, all these guys in the '80s. Well, I got to kind of grow up with them, and I got to see Tom Clancy write Hunt for Red October
yeah,
and 1984 that comes out, and then Red Storm Rising, and then Patriot Games, and Cardinal of the Kremlin, and
hmm,
Clear and Present Danger. And then we start getting into the '90s, and Tom Clancy diversifies a
yeah,
little
it
bit.
does.
So now we have nonfiction Tom Clancy, who writes with someone who's an expert on submarines. They write submarine, and he does that with a few different weapons platforms, for lack of a better term, like an aircraft carrier, tank. And then he did some on different units, like a Marine Corp unit,
Yeah, yeah, those
special
are great.
operations. So he branched out there. Of course, he branched out in the video games as well. He had some co-written thrillers that he starts, Op Center and Net Force. So I looked at Tom Clancy and his how he diversified. And so some of the lessons I took from that were one, well, this is the first kind of diversification, but also I took those lessons earlier on when it came to doing things that Tom Clancy couldn't have done, and by the time they existed, he didn't need to do, like the podcast and a merch line and those sorts of things. And he did the movies and as well, and then of course now there's the series. But diversification was what I took away from that, and also when you look at it, I guess from a business perspective, I guess I don't really look at it that way, but some people are kind of snooty on the nonfiction side of the house. Like I only read nonfiction. You get that a lot. Oh, I only read non,
Yeah.
you know? And like, oh, sorry. Uh, and uh, and so you do get that. So, I guess a little bit of it might be, I mean, it certainly wasn't a deciding factor, but I guess kind of a secondary or, third order, fourth order effect maybe is some of those people maybe saying, oh, I'll check out some of these thrillers. And, like I said, I do weave a lot of history into the thrillers. And I learned a lot from reading thrillers over the years from being a
Hmm.
little kid. It got me interested in so many things in the nonfiction space, or just things in life in general, or travel to somewhere, or like an activity, whether it's scuba diving or mountain climbing or rock climbing or whatever it is. A lot of that comes from, for me anyway, the pages of thrillers
Yeah.
growing up. So I think
Me too.
there's a huge benefit to reading thrillers and to doing both, to having a nice mix of thrillers, fiction, and nonfiction in one's life. But maybe part of that is somebody will bridge the gap a little bit or something like that. And the other side as well, maybe someone who only reads thrillers or listens to thrillers now will read something like this and read some nonfiction, and then have some other worlds open up that way.
Well, and I've heard a lot of stuff lately about, especially your Red Sky Morning Tour. I think I saw it on social media that you're bringing first time readers into the fold because of the Terminal List series and James Reece, and this diversification. Now you might be bringing in readers from the nonfiction side, and I don't think people really understand the impact of that on the thriller world of bringing in young readers, because the world today is scrolling on Instagram and TikTok and all that. Getting them to open up a 400-page book and sit through it when they're used to 10-second instant gratification, bringing new readers is huge. It's massive, and it can't be overstated. So I think it's awesome that you're dipping into that, and I hope it brings people over and attracts them to those people who maybe only read nonfiction to read the Terminal List series because they're missing out.
Yeah, no, it's from the very beginning. I mean, I've been so, I wouldn't say shocked, but I do hear it a lot. Like I haven't read a book since seventh grade, or since they made me in high school, or thank you so much for getting me into reading again. And that like I get that a lot, both
That's awesome.
online and then in these book events, also on book tour. So I hear that so often. So I even created a new podcast and a new kind of vertical this last summer. Started in July with a book club. So the idea is, now that I'm a few into it, is to get people to get a book ahead of time. So instead of like the week it comes out, the podcast doesn't drop then, but it's a couple weeks later. But get people enough time to read that, and then submit questions that I can ask the author in
Yeah.
a sit down podcast type thing, and post people's pictures with their hashtag, Jack Carr Book Club and all that. Then also partner with independent bookstores around the country, so that you give people an incentive not to hit the easy button on Amazon, but also give that same kind of like price discount that Amazon can give sometimes, and have that come from independent bookstores, but have more people go to them so it makes sense
Yeah.
for them, and maybe just make people aware of how important independent bookstores are to different communities, and try to support them as best we can. So it's about creating new readers, and creating a community of readers, and then also supporting independent bookstores, and try to do a different one every month. So this will be the third. The third one is here in September, and then
Yeah, you just
fourth
did
one will
Don
be in
Bentley, didn't
October.
you?
Did Don Bentley, yep, yep, for his first Mitch rap, and started with Annie Jacobson with her nonfiction, Nuclear War.
Oh yes,
Um,
yes.
and the next one will be The Chamber by Will Dean. Such a great book. Oh my gosh, it was such a pleasure to read that one. So trying to take also, a month, or a book a month, where I'm not reading it for research for one of my novels, nor am I just skimming through something as fast as I can to give it a blurb, or because there's a guest coming up on my Danger Close podcast. I'm not just like scrambling last second to try to like, okay, boom, get through this thing, but have one that I sit down with and read like I read
Yeah.
when I was a kid. I didn't have a worry in the world. I didn't have to get the kids to school, or make sure there's dinner on the table, or pay this bill, or whatever it is. So it's a time for me to sit down and just enjoy that book without my phone nearby, put the phone in another room where I'm
Yeah.
just reading, and yeah, making some notes. It's for the podcast and it's for the book club,
Sure.
but I'm reading it in a way that's not work. It's for pleasure and the magic in those pages, so that I can talk to the author about it through that lens, essentially. So there's a few different components to it, but yeah, it's really about creating new readers, because there's so many distractions out there that a book is competing with. these
I
days,
know.
and
It's
it's tough
crazy.
to see that. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Red Sky Morning Tour. It was so big before you even kicked it off that you made a T-shirt for it, um, but which I
I want to
thought
do a
was
little.
super
People that
cool.
follow me on the social channels know that I'm a fan of the '80s, and if I could get in that time machine, I would go back to 1985 and stay there forever. But yeah, I wanted to make a little kind of like retro T-shirt for it. You know, just do something fun. And the first chapter in Red Sky Morning is kind of a nod to Tom Clancy because 2024. Is the 40th anniversary
Yep.
of the Hunt for Red October. So I wanted to have in the prologue, sorry, not the first chapter, prologue, a kind of a Tom Clancy-esque submarine chapter. So
It was very cool.
the
It was very cool.
presence. Thank you. So yeah, I wanted to kick it off that way. So did that, and then the rest of the book really is a nod to Ian Fleming, and because it's my seventh book, so 007th book, and Ian Fleming was such an influence on me through his writing, and then of course the movies that I wanted to weave a couple of things in there. So I think there's like a couple of things in there that any casual band fan will notice, and then there's a bunch of stuff that even probably the most ardent Bond fan will not notice. So and everything in between. So I kind of wove it in, but it had to be natural. It couldn't just be thrown in there
Yeah.
just to do it. It had to naturally be a part of the story, naturally be able to be woven in there. But that was so fun to be able to do that. It also gave me some excuses to go back and dive into some of the old Ian Flemings. So this room behind me is pretty much all nonfiction, except for these shelves here, which are my books, and then Ian Fleming's right here. So and that Bond continuation novels up top. So I wanted to weave some things in there that would be fun for the for Bond fandom, and part of it, like some people think that like some of the more cynical people out there that I see, even though I try to avoid it, I try to get on socials and thank people or hit that like button or
Right.
whatever else. But I really like to thank people because I feel so grateful and so fortunate that I get to do what I love, and it's all because of the people that read the books and tell a friend and that sort of a thing. But you see the nasty comments even as you're trying to go through and say thank you to people or hit that heart button. And one of them that comes up is like, it must be nice to be able to, put product placement in the books or whatever. And none of it's paid product placement. It's all natural. And I got that from Ian Fleming because he did that in his books. And he was one of the first people to do that. I liked that as a kid. And then as a gear guy myself in books that I read growing up, I was always wondering, like, if it just said he grabbed a knife, I was always like wondering what kind
What
of knife
kind?
that was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was always into that. And then of course David Morrell. There wasn't a knife in First Blood for those who read the novel. That was something Sylvester Stallone brought to the character with the film. But then with the novelization of Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3, now there's a knife in there.
Yeah.
And
Iconic.
so David Morrell talks about who made that knife, and then he puts that right there in the author's note in the beginning of both of those novelizations. But so for me, gear is just a natural thing to weave in. It has to be natural and has to obviously be there for a reason. Usually, it's to tell you something about the character, but none of it's like paid product placement. What was cool about the show too is that Amazon didn't do any product placement in the terminal list. All the stuff in there was all natural, like a Sitka T-shirt that
Yeah. I
James Reece is
noticed
wearing.
that.
Sitka didn't pay anything. He didn't pay anything. They didn't pay anything for that.
Really.
So there's Sornex gear, like weights in the corner of the garage. There's all sorts of stuff, and there's no paid product placement. But people think there is, I guess, because they think that everything is like that. But it's not the case for the show, and certainly not the case for the books. Although maybe I should.
We had missed opportunity here.
I know it's possible. It's possible, but you see those, you're like, and you can't respond to those people. You just go,
Oh no,
yeah.
I had Sarah Adams on, and we talked about Benghazi and the amount of like hatred,
Oh wow.
hateful emails and YouTube comments that I got that I just deleted because I had her on and all people defending Hillary Clinton and the actions and all this stuff, and I was like, wow, like people
Oh,
were in their feelings over a 45-minute interview, and it was like, come on, guys, this is ridiculous.
it's so tough.
Hmm.
It's so tough. I don't know why people feel the need to spend what little time they have on this planet saying nasty things in comments rather than just moving on with their life. But it
Yeah,
seems to be the kind of the stage we're at these days, I guess. But yeah,
yeah.
I'm not going to spend my time in the comments section.
Yeah, I think Joe Rogan said it. I heard him say it on his podcast one time. Like, just don't go look at the comments. Just don't
Is
bother with it.
post and ghost, he says. He's
Yeah,
told me
yeah,
many times. He says post and ghost. And
yep.
I always say, well, I like to go through and say thank you to people, but I certainly don't get drug into any discussions with someone
Yeah.
on there about anything. But yeah, yeah, there's no need for that. But you do see them, which is why he tells me to post and ghost, which I should probably start doing, unfortunately, because I do love saying thank you to people, and I love
Yeah.
being up, even if it's late at night. I love saying thank you and hitting that heart button for people, because my how thankful I am is genuine, and so I like to be able to show it through this medium of
Well,
social
and
media. But
connecting to people, and so many times, you see celebrities and all that, and you wonder if it's really them on the other side of the phone. Are they really
yeah,
saying something back? Like, you want that to be genuine. Like, no, it really is Jack on the other side of this. I'm reading your messages, but then you get those hateful jerk offs who are like, oh, that wouldn't ever happen. You don't know what you're talking about. Blah blah blah.
or
So
anything. Some just like that hate you so much they want to just tell you, and it's like okay. But yeah, eventually, I mean, it'd be sad, but to have to do it. But eventually, maybe I'll have to step away from it. Who knows? But as of this interview, I'm still on there and thanking people as much as I can, and trying to just not look at the nasty stuff. So
yeah,
someone said it the other day. Who told me the other day? Last weekend, someone said something along the lines of, "If you wouldn't take advice from someone, don't take criticism from them." It's like, oh,
that's
that's
good.
pretty good.
I like
Yeah.
that.
It's like, oh, yeah,
That's really good.
yeah.
So you've had a really busy year, maybe your busiest year so far. A fiction book, a nonfiction book. There was big announcements about the Terminal List series, Dark Wolf and season 2. I know you probably can't say a whole lot about it, but how is production going? Are you getting excited about the spinoff in the next season?
Oh yeah, yeah. When we get off this, uh,
Oh,
cut once with my notepad. Well, actually, I watch without the notepad first, and then I'll watch it again with the notepad and see if anything that I bump on it happens twice. And then I'll make notes and then send those notes in. Those go to the executive production team and then goes into the next round of edits, or at least it's then discussed. And we'll see if we have, say, other footage, or do we need to do a voiceover, or need to edit something out, or does it need something then in? So we'll talk about it then. But oh, it's looking good. It is looking. I'm so excited about it,
yeah.
because it does turn from like starts out like as like a war, kind of a military war centric thing, and turns very quickly into an espionage thriller. So I think I'm safe to say that. And Taylor is just crushing it. Oh my
Oh
gosh, such
yeah.
a great cast and crew. But I'm really excited for it. It's exceeding my expectations, and we still haven't treated the into the film or put in the visual effects or done the audio. So you're seeing these cuts fairly raw. I mean, there's some music in there and things like that, but it's not the what it's going to end up with at the very end. It's all going to get treated and all the rest of it. But I'm super excited. It's really good.
Are Dark Wolf and season 2 going to come out around the same time? Is that planned for 2025, or you think it'll be a bit of a gap between the two?
I would guess, but we haven't even I haven't been in those discussions yet, but it is, I guess, 2025 for Dark Wolf, and then I would guess 2026 for True Believer, but that's just a guess.
Okay.
So they won't come out at the same time; they'll be at least a year apart. You
Okay.
know.
Okay. But you're pumped. You're really excited for it, huh?
Oh, it's looking good. Oh, it's looking really good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get so excited talking about it. I want to say more, because I'm so excited about it.
I know.
But
I'm not trying to get you in trouble, so I'm like,
yeah.
oh.
We're filming a few final scenes, and then it'll be done and full on edits for the last couple episodes, and then it'll go and get all the treatments and all the rest of it, and off we go.
So, what did you think about when you were kind of approaching this idea and you didn't have a book to go off of, like you do in the Terminal List, and it's kind of a fresh page, but you still have to. Well, you got to look back and stay true to the characters, even though it's like a prequel, I guess.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
what was your approach to kind of doing that and staying true, but having a fresh take on the characters?
Yeah, it was cool because it was different, and also cool because there's a segment of people that just are going to be of social media. So because it's not based on a book, that doesn't really exist. Now the characters, of course, do, it being a
Right.
prequel. Um, but they don't exist as like, hey, this says that this person is this age, or this person is has this color hair, or this person, where did it happen to this person? Well, you only have a certain amount of hours. And for me, going into the first one, I knew that First Blood, the book, very different than First Blood, the movie, both amazing. But so I knew there was going to be changes. I knew you're adapting this thing from a book to a series, and there are going to be changes. So I went in with that mindset, and also the mindset of a student. I want to learn about this process. I want to learn about screenwriting. I want to learn about every aspect of production. I want to know what these guys do over here, and I want to learn how the stunt coordinator works with the technical advisor who works with then the director of photography. I want to know what the medical people on set are standing by and what their med plan is. I want to know about all the props and how and all of that. Sometimes props are hard to get. Exact same cop things that are in the book, you just can't get them, or in some cases, it's illegal to have them, or whatever else, even though it's a movie and it's fake. Or it's a TV show and it's fake. So I wanted to learn about all of those different aspects of filmmaking and go in as a student and then add value where I could. So same thing with this, but it was nice to be able to create something out of whole cloth that has a basis, and in this case, a basis of some characters' backgrounds, specifically to True Believer. So it's to be a nice flow into True
Mm.
Believer. So for me, it was just it was a great experience, and I got to write a script with on the last show. I just advised on everyone, so I gave my notes on every script, notes on every episode, that sort of a thing. But this time I actually got to write one as part of the writers' room, and with the showrunner. So we have one together. So once again, always learning, always adapting, and it's really a team effort. The books are me sitting here by myself in front of my computer. Boom. If people hate it, nobody to blame but me.
Yeah, it's on
And
you.
uh, it's 100% on me. Show is different because it is such a collaborative effort. And there's so many things that from the outside looking in, you wouldn't even realize have an impact on the show. Maybe an actor's schedule, like that can impact a show, a location can impact a budget, can impact, there are so many things that can impact the story. And then you have to adapt and you have to write to those things or around those things, or write something in spite of something, or maybe something's even additive that you didn't know
Yeah.
that you thought was going to be a problem at first. So there's all these things. People get very upset looking at something from the outside if you're just staring at it and have no idea of the work that went in, and then all the constraints that go along with having, let's say, 8 episodes for that first season. Each episode also has to have kind of a beginning, middle, and end. There has to be
Hmm.
this through line. You have to have all these things. They have to kind of stand alone as you go, but then you have to have this overarching storyline as
Yeah.
well, and this overarching through line. And so there's all sorts of things that go into it that I think I appreciated from the outside, but now I appreciate even more that I've been a part of it. And now when I see something, I realize it's subjective, and no matter how horrible I think it is, I know how much work went in to make that horrible thing,
Yeah.
and it's subjective. Someone might love it. So, I'm never going to say something was bad. I'm not going to say this book or this TV show or this movie, because it's subjective. It's an art form. It's subjective, and two, someone's going to like it
Yeah.
for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
And it just might not be for me, and that's okay. But I don't feel the need to also get on and jump on a review and tell someone how much I hated it.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's just not me. But that was a long way of me saying that. Yeah, super excited, and it was very cool to be able to work with something that wasn't based on a book, but had characters and certain pieces of each character's background that are mentioned in the books.
Well, before I let you go, I got two more questions for you. One of them
Yeah.
is, what do you miss most about being in the military?
Oh, you're supposed to have certain answers to this, but I don't. I'm not the worst liar in the world. I just can't do it. For me, I think it was a time. It was foundational, just like reading was foundational to my whole life. Reading books on military, on warfare, terrorism, insurgencies, counterinsurgencies, and then reading the thrillers as well. Being a student of warfare, being able to put that study into practical application in Iraq and Afghanistan, but I recognize that it was for a time, and that time has passed. And so I don't look back on it really thinking about what I miss. I look forward and look forward to what I'm building. I look forward to watching this 106 episode later and making my notes. I look forward to writing the next chapter in this next book that should be coming out next spring, that I'll announce in the next couple weeks. So I look forward to building, I guess, rather than, oh,
Okay.
remember that time in Iraq and Afghanistan, remember that time in the platoon hut that was so awesome, or out at the bars with the boys, or
Yeah.
all that stuff. I realized that it was for a time, and it was extremely formative, and I was extremely fortunate to be a part of it, and feel humbled to have been a part of it for as long, and I did it for as long as I could. And then it was time to move on and turn the page and have those past experiences be part of this ever growing kind of foundation, the next stage as I move forward. So I don't really look at it in those terms of what I miss about it. It's more like what I'm thankful for, and just thankful to have been born in a country, to live in a country where I have these options and opportunities to be able to follow these dreams. And one was to serve my country in the military, specifically in the SEAL teams. And have had that opportunity is what I'm thankful for.
That's a really cool way of looking at it. I never looked at it like that. I've always been like, oh, I miss the camaraderie. I'll never have this and that again. Those times, those moments where you're with your unit, your buddies, and you're embracing the suck together. Like you just don't have that anymore. But I never really looked at it like that. Um, looking back on it but moving forward. Like I think that's a really interesting perspective. And thank you for the answer. That was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the truth. So but yeah, when I look back on it, that's what I think about.
Let's lastly talk about the Best Defense Foundation. And I think it's really important
Yeah.
to highlight this. You're a big supporter of it. You've gone and done some things. But what I like the most about it, and I was looking at it a little bit today, is that it seems to get the next generation into that history and what people have done, and you're connecting folks that are 80, 90 years old with even I think you've taken your daughter or your son, one of
Yeah.
them,
Daughter.
that huge age gap, and then connected into that history. What does the Best Defense Foundation mean to you?
Yeah. So it is an incredible organization started by amazing people. I was going to say people. I was going to say just say Donnie, but his wife Catherine as well. Donnie Edwards, his wife Catherine Edwards. They both run this thing together, and it started with Donnie talking to a World War II veteran. He has his history is that he was in the NFL, but his grandfather was at Pearl Harbor. So his grandfather had this impact on him. And then while he was in the NFL, someone was talking to a World War II veteran who said, "Gosh, I'd like to go back to I forget it was Normandy or Iwo Jima or somewhere." And Donnie was like, "I'll take you." And so he took this guy back, and I might be mixing things up a tiny bit here, but the general gist is correct. Took that guy back, and then he saw the impact that it had on this World War II veteran to go back to wherever they went, whether it was Pearl Harbor, whether it was Normandy or the Netherlands. And Donnie decided to make it his life's mission to do that. And then at the same time, as these guys, unfortunately, they're dying off, and they're up there, but start this new part of Best Defense, which is helping current veterans transition to the private sector. So he's growing it, but to have these guys. So I did the first one for the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and took my daughter with me, and she was in high school, and they hadn't had a young person before. I just asked Donnie, "Hey, is it cool if I bring my daughter? I'd love to bring her." And they're like, "Oh, we've never had brought a young person before, but kind of like, I guess, see how it goes, kind of like you have to deal with her type thing." Um, and it was incredible, and they got to see these World War II veterans sitting down across from this 16-year-old kid, and how enthralled she was in hearing their story, and how happy it made them to be able to tell their story to someone of that generation.
So
And
cool.
they were thought, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And then that next June, we did the Normandy one. Same thing. She's the youngest one there, and she's taking her veteran, getting them on and off the buses, getting them to their events, making sure they're taking their medicine, and then sitting down with them at every meal and hearing about these stories. And I mean, she got to hear from, I forget exactly how old he was at the time. I think he was maybe 101 when we met him. He's passed away now, but he was on the airfield on Ford Island. He watches these planes drop down, strafe the airfield. He jumps into this ditch, takes us to this ditch that he said was a sewage ditch then, and it was just a dry ditch when he showed us. They kept them out there. They kept they didn't repair parts of the runway and parts of the hangars. There's still the bullet holes in there all these years later. And then he tells us he got up and he ran 100 yards to the edge of the water and watches these planes bank, turn, and then drop the first torpedoes on Pearl Harbor. And he was a mechanic then on a PBY, which for those listening or watching is as like amphibious type or seaplane. And then he became a pilot and helped sink a Japanese aircraft carrier in the Pacific, and then goes to the Med and sinks a German submarine
What?
in the Med. Yeah, crazy.
That's
And my
insane.
daughter got to hear this story
That's
from
cool.
him.
That's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. So now Best Defense Foundation has been taking young people back. So now, and she got to be in charge of the group of young people that went with us to the 80th anniversary this last June. And
Oh,
actually, she's getting back from the Netherlands right now. She took time off school to go and do that without me this time. And so she's out there once again in charge of a small group of younger kids that are out there with these veterans that are learning all about Market Garden and Battle of the Bulge, and it's
that's
just
amazing.
incredible all
That
to
is so
do
cool.
that. So yeah, Best Defense Foundation. It's incredible. Donnie Edwards and Catherine Edwards just doing amazing things.
Well, and kudos to your daughter for doing all that and getting into it. It's like it's so cool to see the younger generation embrace that, and you know you think their priorities right now are TikTok and video games and all that stuff, and to see someone do that is I'm kind of jealous. I wish I could get my kids into doing that. I could barely get them to clean their own dishes.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough these days. The social media companies and Apple with the device not helping us any.
No, no, no. Well, Jack, it's been a pleasure. I know you're a busy guy. I'm gonna let you go, but thank you for carving out the time, coming on, sending me a copy of the new book, Beirut. Thank you so much. It was great. Everybody needs to go get it. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Take care.